I hope that you're well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 6 English lesson on transitive and intransitive verbs. And before we start our lesson, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 6. And then we're going to grade 6, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of transitive and intransitive verbs. All right. So our chapter is transitive and intransitive verbs. Our subject is English language arts. Grade 6. And the lessons that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of transitive and intransitive verbs is to identify transitive and intransitive verbs. All right. And we are doing our tutorial lessons on aplusstudents.ca. So when we are done, we're going to aplusstudents.ca. So when it comes to transitive and intransitive verbs, right? Action verbs can either be transitive or it can be intransitive. So action verbs can either be transitive or it can be intransitive. And when an action verb is transitive, it is followed by a direct object, right? And a direct object is a pronoun a noun, or it is a noun phrase that receives the action of the verb, right? So an action can either be transitive or it can be intransitive. And when our action is transitive, when the action verb is transitive, then it is followed by a direct object. And we say the direct object, it is either a pronoun, it is a noun, or it is a noun phrase that is receiving the action of a verb, right? And the verb is the action. And in order for us to find the direct object, we need to ask ourselves what or whom the verb is acting on, right? That is the direct object. And in order for us to find that direct object, right, which is the pronoun, the noun, or the noun phrase that receives the action, we need to then ask ourselves what or whom the verb is acting on. So Joan, we're saying Joan walked her dog, right? So Joan walked her dog. Now we need to ask ourselves, what or whom is this verb acting on? So we need to actually ask ourselves, what or whom is Joan walking? Right? Which means that it is her dog. Which means that if we talk about the transitive verb, right, then walked is our transitive verb within that sentence, and it is or it has a direct object, which is her dog. So who or what did they walk? Was the dog, right? And that is the direct object, which is her dog. So the dog receives the action. And when an action is intransitive, or when an action verb is intransitive, it does not have a direct object. It doesn't have. For example, Joan walked around the block. So even if we were to ask ourselves what or whom, right, the verb is acting on, it's not acting on anything because it's not giving us, for example, that direct object, right? So it just says Joan walked around the block, but it's not telling us what or whom did Joan walk, because Joan walked around the block. She did not walk anything. So there's no direct object to answer that question, what or whom it is acting on. Which means that the verb, which is walked, it's intransitive within that sentence, and it does not have a direct object. So if, for example, you have a direct object, then it's called a transitive verb, right? And a transitive verb, it is when an action is, for example, followed by a direct object. And a direct object, we said, is either a pronoun, a noun, or a noun phrase that is receiving the action of the verb. It's receiving the action of the verb. And we can ask ourselves, in order to find the direct object, we can ask ourselves what or whom the verb is acting on. So with the transitive verb, it is acting on something, but with an intransitive verb, it does not have a direct object because we cannot answer the question what or whom the verb is acting on. It does not have a direct object. All right. And when an action, right, is followed immediately by a prepositional phrase, then it is intransitive. So when an action verb is followed immediately by a prepositional phrase, then it is intransitive. So the noun, the pronoun, or the noun phrase is in a prepositional phrase, it is never a direct object. Remember, we said that with an intransitive verb, right, it does not have a direct object. So when an action verb is followed immediately by a prepositional phrase, then it is intransitive, right? So which means the noun, the pronoun, or the noun phrase in a prepositional phrase is never a direct object. But keeping in mind, intransitive verbs does not have a direct object. And linking verbs are always intransitive, right? So the noun, pronoun, or noun phrase that follows a linking verb describes or renames the subject. So it describes or renames the subject. It does not tell whom and it does not tell what the verb is acting on. And that is what we said earlier on when we made mention that an intransitive verb does not have a direct object. So you cannot answer the question what or whom it is acting on. For example, Joan was a nurse for 25 years before her retirement, right? So this verb, which is was, it's a linking verb. So the word was, or the verb was, it is a linking verb. And the noun phrase, right, which is a nurse, it renames the subject Joan. Because if we either make mention of Joan was, oopsie, we can either say Joan worked for 25 years before retirement, right? But in this case, we're saying Joan was a nurse for 25 years, which means that we are not actually renaming the subject, right? So we're renaming the subject. So Joan was a subject and we're renaming it to a nurse. Yes, I was. Didn't you say you were in grade 3? Right? So this is then a, let's say, linking verb. And the verb, let's say the verb was a linking verb. And the noun phrase, which is a nurse, renames the subject Joan. So Joan is a nurse or was a nurse. So that can basically be the subject. We're renaming her as either a nurse, can even say the nurse worked for 25 years before retirement, or Joan worked for 25 years before her retirement. But we say Joan was a nurse for 25 years before her retirement. Right? And we said we are doing our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So let's go to our lesson, which is to identify intransitive and transitive verbs. All right. So we said that action verbs can be transitive or action verbs can be intransitive, right? And we see that when a action verb is transitive, then it is followed by a direct object. And the direct object, it shows us who or what the verb is acting. So when an action verb is transitive, it is followed by a direct object. And a direct object is a pronoun, the noun, or a noun phrase that receives the action of a verb. And in order for us to find the direct object, we need to ask ourselves what or whom the verb is acting on. For example, Joan walked her dog, right? So now we're asking ourselves what or whom did Joan walk? So we can say Joan walked her dog. So the verb walked, right? It is transitive within the sentence and it has a direct object, and the direct object is her dog. And when an action is intransitive, then it does not have a direct object, right? Which means that even if we were to ask ourselves what or whom the verb is acting on, then we won't be able to answer this question because it does have a direct object. For example, Joan walked around the block. So we need to ask ourselves, what or whom did Joan walk? But the thing is, we cannot answer that because there is no direct object. It was just Joan walking around the block. There was no action or no verb that it was acting on. It wasn't acting on any verb. It was just Joan walking around the block. And Joan walked around the block. The word walked or the verb walked is intransitive within the sentence and it does not have a direct object. And when an action verb is followed immediately by a prepositional phrase, and it is always intransitive, right? So if it's followed by a prepositional phrase, then we always say it is intransitive. So the noun, pronoun, or noun phrase within a prepositional phrase is never a direct object. Linking verbs are always intransitive. So the noun, the pronoun, or the noun phrase that follows a linking verb, right? It describes or renames the subject. It does not tell you whom or does not tell you what the verb is acting on. Because remember, when it comes to intransitive verb, it does not have a direct object, which means that you cannot, it basically will not tell you whom or what it is acting on because it does not have a direct object. So the noun, the pronoun or the noun phrase that follows the linking verb, it describes or renames the subjects and it does not tell you whom and does not tell you what it is acting on. For example, Joan was a nurse for 25 years before her retirement. So the verb was within that sentence is the linking verb. And the noun phrase, which is a nurse, it renames the subject, which is Joan. Right? All right. If we go and do an activity, our activity, right? It says select the action verb. We need to select the action verb. If the verb is transitive, also select the direct object, right? So, contralto singer Marian Anderson performed at John F. Kennedy's presidential inauguration. So, contralto singer Marian Anderson performed at John F. Kennedy's presidential inauguration. So, if we select our action verb, right? If you look at that sentence, what do you think is the action verb? It says contralto singer Marian Anderson performed at John F. Kennedy's presidential inauguration. So, what is our action verb within that sentence? And if we select our action verb, it will then be performed. It's the action that is being done. So, performed is our action verb. All right. All right, let's see. Select the action verb. If the verb is transitive, then we also need to select the direct object. The the gravitational force between Jupiter and Io, was it Io? Yeah. One of the Jupiter's moons, oh, squeezes Io like a rubber ball. So gravitational force between Jupiter and Io, one of Jupiter's moons, squeezes Io like a rubber ball. So if we were to select our action verb, right? And then we will say squeezes and Io. So squeezes Io like a rubber ball. All right, here it says Annie jumped cannon and Wilhelmina Fleming, influential pioneers in modern astronomy, catalogued stars from the observatory at Harvard. So we need to select the verb, right? And our action verb over here is catalog. This is our action verb. And if the verb is transitive, we also need to select the direct object. So basically, stars is then our transitive verb. Because it's basically asking us whom. If we ask ourselves what or whom is the verb acting on, then we can say the stars from the observatory at Harvard. Right? All right, because here it says the action verb is cataloged. Right? That is our action verb. And it is translated as a direct object, which is stars, which we identified. And the direct object answers the questions, what did Cannon and Fleming catalog? So what did they catalog? And they cataloged stars. Right? So if you can ask yourself the question, what or whom the verb is acting on, then by all means that is a transitive verb. But if you cannot answer that question, then it is an intransitive verb. Then we only select the action verb. Right? So once again, before we go on to our test, it says that an action verb can be either transitive or intransitive. And when a verb is transitive, then it is followed by a direct object. And a direct object, the pronoun, or it is the noun, or it is the noun phrase that receives the action of a verb. And to find the direct object, we need to ask ourselves what or whom the verb is acting on. Right? And then when an action is intransitive, then it does not have a direct object. So even if you were to ask yourselves what or whom it is acting on, then you won't be able to because it does not have a direct object. And when an action verb is followed immediately by a prepositional phrase, then it is always intransitive, right? There's no direct object. And the noun, pronoun, or noun phrase is a prepositional phrase, and it is never a direct object. And linking verbs are also intransitive. The noun, pronoun, or noun phrase that follows a linking verb describes or renames the subject, but it does not tell us whom or what the verb is acting on. Right? All right, so let's go to our test. We need to select the action verb, right, within the sentence. And if the verb is intransitive, if the verb is transitive, then we also need to select the direct object. It says, during the flood, water seeped into the walls of the homes on Vendale Street. So during the floods, water seeped into the exterior walls of the homes on Vendale Street. So we need to select the action verb. Is it water or is it seeped? So we need to select our action verb. Is it water or seeped? Because during the flood, water seeped into the exterior walls of the homes on Vendale Street. So we need to select our action verb, the action that took place. And if we were to choose the or select the action verb, then we will say seeped. That is the action that took place, right? So well done. Seeped is correct. We need to select the action verb. And if the verb is transitive, then also select the direct object, right? Annie Jump Cannon and Wilhelmina Fleming, two influential pioneers in modern astronomy, they catalog stars from the observatory at Harvard. So we need to select the action verb. Is it catalog stars, which is both our verb plus our, let's say, our direct object? Or is it just cataloged, which is just us selecting the action verb? So here it is, right? Annie Cannon and Wilhelmina Fleming, two influential pioneers in modern astronomy, they catalog stars from the observatory at Harvard, right? So now we need to also ask ourselves what or whom, right, did they basically catalog? So we need to even ask ourselves what or whom did they catalog? So which means that they catalog stars. So we have a transitive, which is also the direct object. So which means that it is then catalogs stars because stars is our direct object. It tells us what was cataloged, the action. So cataloged stars. We need to select the action verb. If the verb is transitive, then also select its direct object, right? This Mexican restaurant serves tacos with generous portions of halibut. I'm not sure if I'm saying the word right. Cabbage and salsa. So this Mexican restaurant serves tacos with generous portions of halibut, cabbage, and salsa. So is it serves tacos or is it just the action verb which is serves? So it's like us asking ourselves, whom or what is it acting on? And this Mexican restaurant serves tacos. So serves tacos, which is the action verb and the direct object, or it just serves, which is just the action verb. All right. And serves tacos is our answer because it is our action verb and it is a transitive verb, which means that we also identified our, our transitive verb, which is our direct object, which is tacos. The black widow spider spider, one of the most venomous spiders in North America, frequently builds webs around the wood piles, fences, and areas with accumulated debris. So the black widow spider, one of the most venomous spiders in North America, frequently builds webs around the wood piles, fences, and areas with accumulated debris. We need to select the action verb, and if the verb is transitive, then we also select the direct object. So it builds webs, which is the action verb, plus intransitive verb, which identifies or selects the object's direct object, or is it just the action verb, which is builds? All right, and if we were to select our action verb, right, or our correct answer, then we will say builds webs. And builds webs, it's our action verb, and it also shows that the verb is transitive. So which means that webs is our direct object. We need to select the action verb, right? And if the verb is transitive, then also select the direct object. Three London-based students, Rodrigo Garcia Gonzalez, Pierre Paslia, and ooh, Kalami Kuchi won a design award for their waste reducing edible water bottle. So, three London based students won a design award for their waste reducing edible water bottle. So, is it won a design award or just won a design? All right. So we will say won a design award, it being transitive verb. So the verb being transitive, right? All right, so now we're going to select the action verb, right? On July 25, 1911, Daredevil Bobby Leach famously plunged over Niagara Falls in a steel barrel. So on July 25, 1911, Daredevil Bobby Leach famously plunged over Niagara Falls in a steel barrel. So we need to select our action verb. Is it plunged or is it over? The action verb, is it plunged or is it over? Because this is an intransitive verb, or the verb is intransitive. All right, and if we select the verb, right? We say it is plunged. And plunged is correct. So well done. All right, so we're going to select the action verb, right? Because verb is going to be intransitive. During World War II, Anne Frank and her family hid for 2 years in the back of an office building on Amsterdam's Prinsengracht Canal. 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 So during World War II, Anne Frank and her family hid for 2 years in the back of an office building on Amsterdam's Prinsengracht Canal. So we need to select the action verb. Is it for or is it hid? The action verb, the verb, the action taking place. For or hid. All right, and if we choose or we select our action verb, then we select hid because hid is to hide. All right, let's do the last one. This is the last one. We need to select the action verb. If the verb is transitive, then also select the direct object, right? Olympus Mons, a massive shield volcano on Mars, area about the size of Arizona. So Olympus Mons, a massive shield volcano on Mars, covers an area about the size of Arizona. So we need to select the action verb. And if the verb is transitive, then we also select the direct object. So is it option one, which is covers an area about the size of Arizona? Or is it massive shield? So covers an area about the size of Arizona, which is option one, or massive shield, which is option two. Which is either just the action verb or it's the action verb. And if the verb is transitive, then also the direct object. All right, and if we select the correct one, we'll say covers an area about the size of Arizona. Oopsie. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on transitive and intransitive verbs, right? We said that an action is basically both transitive as well as intransitive. And with transitive verbs, right, we also have a direct object. Intransitive verb does not have a direct object, right? So we cannot ask ourselves whom or what the action is, feeding on, right? So this is now the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, grade 6, for joining our class. Until next time, goodbye.